The mop water was still warm when Samuel set the bucket down, steam curling faintly into the dim light of the empty lobby. Outside, snow flurried against the glass in lazy spirals, but inside, his world was the soft swish of fabric and the faint citrus tang of cleaner. He moved with quiet care, as if the floor itself might be listening. At the far end of the hall, a woman sat alone on a bench, her gaze distant, lips still but eyes restless. Samuel paused, his hand tightening on the mop handle. Something about her stillness hummed in him, like a chord waiting for the next note. Upstairs, in an office lined with glass and money, desperate words had just been spoken. Down here in silence, something was about to begin. The city poured itself in gold across the glass, and the light slid along the conference table until it found her hands. Leela turned her palms into it like someone learning what warmth felt like. The ring of keys at Cal's hip caught a beam and threw little coins of brightness across the walls. The building had that early hush, the kind where vents whisper and machines think. His mop leaned by the door, dripping into a yellow bucket, but he'd already wrung out the night. What was left now was morning and breath, and the soft work they did before anyone else came in. He set a paper cup on the table and placed a slim straw against its rim. "Same as yesterday," he said, voice easy, letting it carry the smile his mouth didn't push. "Gentle, we're just moving air, no hurry, we let the cup tell us we did it." Leela nodded once. That new haircut made her eyes a little braver, or maybe the braveness was all hers and the haircut just stopped hiding it. She looked at the window and then at him. It was their check-in. He touched the straw, she matched his breath. The little paper cup trembled, a satisfying, ridiculous little shake that made a ripple race across the water. Her lips rounded, not for sound, but for shape. He watched her throat. A small muscle there flickered like the wing of a bird thinking about flight. "Good," he said, and meant the word. "Again." Above them, the air unit hummed. Somewhere down the hall, the ice machine clanked like it had punched in for the day. Cal liked these sounds. They were a song no one had to perform. He let them be the metronome as he counted her breaths in the rough cadence they'd invented. 1 for trust, 2 for trying, 3 for rest. He had the mop bucket with him partly because if anyone asked what he was doing on the executive floor at dawn, a bucket spoke a language they understood. Leela pressed her mouth around the straw and exhaled. The surface trembled. A bubble climbed. He felt it light his chest. It was such a small thing to hang joy on, and yet. "You feel that?" He lifted his hand, palm open by the cup. The water trembled under his fingers. She tapped the table twice. There, yes. That had been hers the first day, when words hadn't come but tapping could. He went with what worked. You always started where you were. You built a bridge with what you could reach. They worked until the windows went from gold to white and the parking garage threw its far-off echo, tires squealing too fast for concrete. Cal kept his voice slow anyway. Sometimes the only way through hurry was to refuse it. The elevator chimed. Leela flinched like the sound had walked right up to her and tapped her shoulder. He reached and clicked the panel next to the door so the chime would hush itself, then angled his body so the door wasn't in her line of sight. Not blocking, just there. "I can ask for that sound to stay off," he said casually. "Or we can find a way to make it our friend, your call." She glanced at the panel and back at him. Her shoulders eased. He could live with that. He pulled something from his back pocket and clicked it onto the table, his keys. He slid them into 2 neat lines, shiny brass and shadowed nickel, some jagged, some smooth as old river stones. "Pick a sound," he said and lifted the loop. The small ones chimed, the big ones thunked. She watched, then touched the thinnest key with a fingernail. A bright little note went into the room and hung there, daring someone to grin at it. He grinned. She didn't, but she let her head rest a fraction of an inch to the right. A tiny tilt she did when she liked something and didn't know how she felt about liking it yet. "Good ear," he said. "You found the sparkly one." The elevator chimed again, farther away. The building woke itself, voices in the hall beginning to collect. He capped the cup, slid the straw into his pocket, gathered his keys, and they moved. They moved like they always did when other feet showed up, down a service stair that smelled like fresh paint and old gum, into the quiet warmth of the cafeteria where the coffee machines gurgled, and the pastry case had 2 lonely muffins that looked like they'd make decent coasters. He stole a booth by the window that faced the little courtyard fountain, the one that hadn't worked since winter. The plants needed water. Leela ran her fingers across the laminated pictures of menu items that didn't exist yet. He set down the container he'd brought from home, opened it, and slid it in front of her. Tomato soup, salty and sweet. He'd learned quick that she grew braver with warm things in her hands. "Smell," he said, and put his face over the steam like a kid. "Close your eyes, this is campfire ketchup." He made a face. She actually smiled this time, a flash of teeth and the scrunch that made a dimple show up even though she wasn't the kind of person who did dimples. He dunked a piece of bread, lifted it, watched it drip, and the drip was the point. Gravity, patience, inevitability. She cupped the soup and hummed, soft and almost there, a relic sound from somewhere inside that had nothing to do with his straw. It slipped out uninvited, like a guest forgetting they'd sworn not to come. He didn't pounce. He nodded and ate his own bite and let whatever she'd invited move around until it decided if it wanted to stay. When he looked up again, her eyes were glossy and flinty all at once. He saw the fight and the hurt both. He saw how tired she was of this being a thing, how tired she was of every breath being homework. "If we make it a job, we quit," he said, spoon scraping the bottom of the bowl. "If we make it a game, we can do this all day." She pushed her empty spoon against the table until it made that rubbery squeal. The sound was a child, somehow. The corner of her mouth caught itself again and then let it go. Mr. Vale found them there, as Cal knew he would. CEOs have a way of showing up in rooms you think they don't know exist. He wore a blue shirt without a jacket and the kind of exhaustion that only money can't fix. He stood at the edge of their booth like a man approaching a shoreline, shoes stopping right before they'd get wet. "Morning," he said carefully, like a word might spook them. "I didn't mean to interrupt." Cal nodded. Leela went still the way deer do in backyards. The fountain outside coughed once and then gave up. Mr. Vale looked at his daughter as if he could erase time by staring hard enough at it. Cal watched him watching her and felt something complicated move in his chest. He had never liked seeing a man that tall look so small. "How's it going?" Mr. Vale asked, and his voice was sandpaper on a prayer. "We're learning the sound of soup," Cal said deadpan and tapped the bowl. "Groundbreaking stuff." Mr. Vale blinked at him and then shook a laugh loose, a brittle thing that was grateful to exist. "Whatever works," he said. His eyes went back to Leela. He put a hand on the table but not too close to her, like he was learning the distance that didn't make her pull away. "I have the board at 9, he said to Cal, voice sliding into its other life for a second and then out again. If you, I'm in my office. I'm available to you." Cal held his eyes for a beat longer than a janitor is supposed to. "We're good," he said. The man breathed like he'd been told he could sit down now. "I meant what I said." Mr. Vale's gaze flitted. The words landed on the table like a dare and a promise. "You help her find her voice, you get everything. I meant it. Name it." Leela's jaw tightened. Cal looked at her hands around the soup, then back at her father. He had a dozen retorts and none of them would help. "I'm not naming anything," he said softly. "I'm going to help your daughter do something her body knows how to do. That's the job. She's not a door you unlock with a prize." Mr. Vale absorbed it like a hit he'd decided not to dodge. "I'm sorry," he said after a beat, and this apology sounded like it had cost something. He stopped and put a hand over his mouth for a second and then let it fall. He looked at Leela and said nothing. That was the best thing he did all morning. After he left, they sat with the weight he'd put in the room. Outside, somebody walked a golden retriever that wanted to greet every tree like an old friend. Cal took the paper napkin and tore it into 4 equal squares and made a stack of them, then added the 5th odd one on top like an unpretentious crown. "The roof," he said, "too windy." Leela tapped once and then pointed to the odd napkin. He placed it on his head, dead serious. She huffed. He refused to take it off until she pushed it. He let it slide off into his hand, folded it, and tucked it in his pocket like it was an insurance card. The rooftop garden wasn't much, but it was theirs for as long as the key worked in the lock. A little rectangle of sedum and rosemary and a fig tree that had no right being on a skyscraper, the city shouldering up close with its horns and sirens, its planes angling themselves across an impossible sky. The wind was a polite cousin today. Cal had rigged a balloon to a string from a leftover launched 2 floors down, the kind of company celebration that made a lot of speeches and not much sense. He tied the end to her wrist, and let the balloon hover just above her shoulder. "See," he said. "You breathe out," he nods. "That's not my opinion. That's gravity, which I only fight when it's about ladders." She tested a breath. The balloon obeyed, dipping and swaggering and then settling like an old man in a pool. A smile came, not the flash from earlier, but a small rising tide. He let it take him with it. "Now play a note on it," he said and hummed low. "You like coffee? That He did the sound like he was sipping something too good to be legally obtained. She closed her eyes and tried. The balloon swayed. The sound that left her was not yet sound, not even whisper, just the shape of one. It was enough to make a bee change its flight plan. The sun found her cheekbone and made it a banner. He could have shouted, but he had learned that the universe liked not to be startled when it was performing miracles. He held the moment like a cup without a lid. "Again," he whispered, not asking for more but for anything. They worked like that, the balloon learning her rhythm, the rosemary getting brushed by a breeze and letting loose its secret kitchen smell. He told her to put the back of her hand on her throat and feel it hum. She winced when the elevator chimed far below them, but she didn't jerk this time. He clocked it and kept his voice even. Her fingertips found the spot under her jaw. The smallest trembling answered. He pretended not to exhale like a man who'd been underwater too long. When they went back down, his key stuck in the lock, and for a breath he thought they were caught. He could see the whole story of them spending the rest of their lives on this roof, meeting pigeons and naming the planes. He wiggled, the lock sighed, the door gave. He grinned at her like he'd bent iron with his mind. She rolled her eyes and patted his sleeve, a royal benevolence. On the 32nd floor, a server cart stood in the hall like it had been abandoned mid-mission. The lid had slid half off a covered tray. A cupcake inside had fallen sideways, frosting making a skid like a tiny avalanche. Leela paused. Cal put the lid back politely. When he lifted his hand away, his palm had smeared white. She looked at his hand like an omen. He wiped the frosting on his jeans and made a face at his own stupidity. That got her huff again, a ghost of a laugh that was a promise it had cousins. Back in the conference room, the cup waited, the straw ready. He set them up like it was the first time. He always reset to start. He took his keys out again, laid them out, let them catch the light. This part was for comfort. Ritual wasn't magic, it was recognition. She glanced at the window. The city was fully awake, and this room was becoming the kind of room it wanted to be, full of men with pens clicking, women with hair pulled back like weapons, clips on papers, the slick sheen of decisions. He would have to mop around their shoes soon, but not yet. Not while this was still their time. He put the back of his hand to his own throat and hummed. She mirrored him. Her chest rose. The hum wasn't there, and then it was, small as a cupboard light. It sat between them, not sure if it belonged. He nodded to it like you do to a new neighbor. He said, "You hear it." She closed her eyes and nodded, just barely, and that was when the door handle rattled like someone had a key they weren't sure about. Cal's body went instinctively between her and the door, not a wall, just a shield. The handle turned twice and stopped. Silence climbed up into the ceiling. He heard retreating footsteps, far off and thin like a recording through a wall. In the quiet that followed, something settled in the room that wasn't fear. It felt like a choice they'd made together and not said out loud. He exhaled and looked at her and saw that she'd seen him move without thinking and that she had let him. Something uncoiled in his shoulders that he'd been pretending wasn't clenched. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, because somebody had to say it first. "Even when you don't need me." The napkin in his pocket crinkled. He took it out and smoothed it on the table. He drew with a pen he shouldn't have borrowed, 2 lines for a bridge, a little arc for the river. He wrote under it tomorrow and slid it to her. She turned the napkin, put her index finger where the bridge met the land, and looked at him. This was her promise, he decided. "I'll meet you here." They did one more round with the straw. Her lips shaped the circle, and he wanted to praise the circle itself. He changed his mind and said nothing and let her praise herself by doing it again. When they stopped, her throat muscle fluttered like a moth and then stilled. He took her down to see Manny at the loading dock because Manny told stories with his hands, and you didn't need words to be funny. Manny was mending a radio with more tape than dignity. He looked up when they came in and lit like a sign. "Look who woke up early," Manny said, wiping his palms on a towel that had seen such things. He knelt so his eyes were level with Leela's. He never asked her questions. He showed her things. Today it was a trick where he made a coin vanish and then found it behind his own ear, like he was surprised to discover money in his head. She clapped 1-2 her private yes. He bowed as if the applause had filled a theater. "Your friend here," Manny said, tilting his chin at Cal. "He gets me free coffee by telling them I'm the CEO of the basement." Leela looked at Cal. Cal shrugged. "He is," he said. "All big bosses are actually in the ground, ask any tree." Manny cackled. "You keep this man around," he said to Leela. "He knows what's what." In the quiet after Manny turned his radio back on and the old soul song slid over the concrete like a blessing you could dance to, Cal felt more than heard Leela's almost sound hum. It followed the melody like a skittish kid on a bike coasting behind a parent's steady wheel. He didn't look at her. He looked at the graffiti on the freight door. He let the sound be. By late afternoon, the building had inhaled enough noise to fog a mirror. Cal had a floor to make honest and a leak to harass. He did the work, and he did it like it mattered because the building noticed when you didn't. Between tasks, he checked his phone as if his life had started to send him messages and might keep doing it. There was one now, unknown number. It had the courtesy to be brief. "Don't take her to the roof again." He stared at it until it went dark. He cleaned a handprint off the glass so clean that someone would put their hand there again because it looked so lonely without one. He told himself he would delete the text. He didn't. Instead, he took a breath that matched the ones he counted for Leela, and he went back upstairs. Mr. Vale caught him in the hall. He had his jacket back on, armor reassembled. "I have to fly to Chicago tonight," he said. "I'll be back tomorrow. Can I trust you?" "You can leave," Cal said. He kept his tone in the middle. "We'll work on the counting." Mr. Vale glanced at the closed door to the room where Leela sat with her back to the glass. "I'm sorry for..." He gestured at everything, the building, the time, his life. "You said earlier about doors, I heard you, I'm trying." "I know," Cal said, because he did. "Maybe tomorrow, bring her something to smell that's from home." Mr. Vale blinked, surprised to be told to do something so human. "Like cookies." "Like laundry detergent," Cal said. "You wear a shirt long enough, she'll know more than any doctor can tell you." He saw the giant of a man imagine himself carrying a bag of laundry into his own boardroom. He loved that the world made room for such images. Mr. Vale's mouth twitched. He nodded. He walked away lighter by the weight of a barbell you shouldn't carry. Dusk held the city to the glass like a secret you pass in a gym locker room, warm and conspiratorial. The heels had clicked out. The lights settled into the kind of glow that buildings afford themselves when they know they look good at night. Cal went back into the conference room with fresh cups, fresh water, fresh him. Leela was where he'd left her, but something had changed in the air, the way a room smells different after someone cries. Her eyes were steady. The napkin bridge sat in front of her, the word tomorrow underlined once. He sat across from her, placed his hand on the table, palm up. She did the same, they didn't touch. He counted slow, 1 for trust, 2 for trying, 3 for rest. On the 4th, he hummed, and this time he let it drop lower where you feel it more than you hear it. He watched her watch his mouth. He saw her decide. She leaned forward like a diver who knows the water is cold and jumps anyway. Her lips parted. Air moved. The building held its breath. And from her throat came the smallest thread of sound, not a word yet, not anything you could write down, but a note that found him the way a key finds a lock you didn't know you were carrying. She made it again a little surer, like a violin string tuning itself to something only she could hear. His eyes stung. He didn't look away. He didn't reach. He anchored himself by the cup. Outside, a siren arced and then faded, as if the city itself had turned its head to listen. Her mouth shaped another vowel. He watched the shape and knew the word before it happened, and the knowledge hit him so soft he almost missed the impact. She had chosen a small word, a door barely cracked. The simplest there is when you want the world to come in without rushing you. Her tongue moved. Her breath drew the sound to the edge. The note slid into the room like a coin into a wishing well. "Oh," Leela breathed, small and round and true, and the sound shivered the water in the paper cup as if it could hear her. Cal felt it catch low in his chest, a soft, grateful ache he had no words for. He didn't move. He let the air be what it was, shared, warmed enough. She made it again, a careful echo. Oh. He nodded once so she would see him see her. Outside the window, a plane crossed the violet edge of dusk. The city leaned in. They didn't chase it. He kept them both still. He wanted to laugh, to cry, to clap like Manny would clap, but he stayed with the shape of her mouth because the circle mattered. He lifted the straw and rolled it between his fingers, and she rounded her lips without touching it. The cup trembled. The balloon string in his pocket ticked against his leg like a heartbeat he'd stolen from the roof. When the elevator chimed down the hall, she flinched and then didn't. He watched the change happen in her shoulders. He counted the breath they had taught themselves, 1 for trust, 2 for trying, 3 for rest. Tomorrow, he said, tapping the napkin bridge. She touched the little drawn arch and looked at him like she knew the word before he did. He walked her to the elevator. The doors spread with a sigh. She stepped in. The chime offered its bright little test, and Leela looked at it, not away from it, and let out a whisper of the circle again. Oh! It answered like any machine does when you tell it you're not afraid anymore, by doing its job and minding its own business. After she was gone, the building returned to his, and he let his hands do the work that had always steadied him. He mopped the corners nobody looked at, and tightened the loose screw on the railing that had been asking for weeks, and set the chairs straight in conference rooms he couldn't spell the names of. His phone buzzed while he was on 30. Unknown number, 2 sentences that knew how to bruise. Don't take her to the roof again. Last warning. He stood at the window and cleaned a thumbprint so clean it was like a new skin. He read the words 3 times. He imagined throwing the phone into the dark, and imagined not being the kind of person who ran when someone wrote in capital letters. He called Manny. You got that text too? Manny said, voice big as a hug through a bad speaker. Ops sent some blast about access. Legal gets nervous when people look happy on heights. Who's behind it? Cal asked. Different people on different days. Today it's a woman named Marla who signs emails with a hawk emoji. But listen, man, they don't have a camera on your heart. Get what you need in other rooms. Cal traced a circle on the glass with the side of his hand until it disappeared. Copy, he said. Tomorrow it is. The courtyard fountain coughed again as if trying to clear its throat. He could almost hear it say, help me. He found the panel behind the ficus that had learned to fake health. He knelt, screwdriver between his teeth. The pump housing had shaken itself loose, stubborn as old furniture. He tightened, nudged, listened. Manny showed up with a headlamp and the kind of tape that fixes everything except regret. They talked without saying much while they worked. Bolts, sealant pressure. The pump grumbled like an old man getting out of a chair and then, pleased with itself, threw a thin ribbon of water into the air. It caught the courtyard lights and made a quiet, steady sound, the kind of sound that makes your jaw unclench without your permission. Cal stood back and let the relief run over him. Manny saluted the fountain like it had made rank. White noise, Manny said. Cheaper than therapy. Don't tell the therapists, Cal said. He slept short and dreamless. Morning came gold again, then white. He brought 2 cups this time. He set the straw down and didn't mention it. He turned the chime off. He let the quiet announce itself. Leela arrived with a scarf like a small cloud around her neck. Her eyes found the napkin bridge immediately. He had put it under a glass so nobody would mistake it for trash. She slid it closer. Her hands moved differently now, with a permission that hadn't been there yesterday. He didn't name it. He let it be hers. Mr. Vale arrived a beat later, early for once, carrying a canvas laundry bag over his shoulder with a patience that made the whole building tilt. It looked so wrong on him it was perfect. His suit was a little wrinkled. The bag bumped his back. A secretary saw him pass and forgot to hide her smile. I don't know what brand, he said, breathless and earnest like a kid who brought the wrong thing to show and tell. He opened the bag and the room filled with that thick, warm smell only clean clothes know. Cotton, son, a little soap that claimed it rained flowers. He lifted a t-shirt and didn't look at his daughter right away, like if he did and she didn't meet the moment he would break. Leela leaned in. She breathed the fabric like it was a story. Her eyes softened. Something in her face let go. She hummed, a sound you make when the coffee hits the right part of your tongue. Mr. Vale's mouth opened. He covered it with his hand again, like he was keeping something inside that would be too big if it left. Good, Cal said to both of them. That's what home sounds like. They went down together to the courtyard. The fountain ticked into their morning like they owned it. A soft wind lifted the rosemary and laid it back down. Manny pretended to be surprised to see them and did a little two-step behind the bench to keep the moment from getting too serious. Leela stood by the water. She closed her eyes. The fountain poured a quiet curtain between her and everything else. Cal stepped beside her and touched the spot under his jaw again. She mirrored. He kept his voice low. He didn't push. He said, and then rounded it into the circle they had found. Oh. She followed oh, and then surprised herself with a small hi. The breath of the H a white feather, the I a shy bird landing and staying. Her eyes flew open. She looked like someone who had just found the light switch by accident. Manny froze like a magician when his own trick works, then deliberately looked away and fussed with his radio as if nothing remarkable had happened. Mr. Vale was standing 10 feet back like a man waiting at a fence he'd never been invited to jump. He didn't move. His knuckles had gone white on the laundry bag strap. Cal took a step to his right, tiny, nothing, and the path between father and daughter widened by an inch. Leela turned toward the smell she knew better than words. She didn't rush. She placed her feet. The fountain talked for her until she was ready to talk for herself. She looked at her father's shoes and then at his face. She lifted her chin. The vowel she chose was not the circle this time. It was open and easy and old in the mouth. Dad. The word carried so much in 4 letters, Cal felt an entire winter move out of the building and down the block. Vale closed his eyes. When he opened them, water had found its way to the edge and didn't bother to hide. He didn't go to her. He waited. He had learned a thing. He let her close the final step. Leela reached, touched his sleeve, and left her hand there like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to keep it. He didn't take it. He put his own hand under hers so she wouldn't have to hold herself up. He was taller than grief for the first time in months. "Hey, kid," he said. His voice did what roads do when they finally get to water, soften, widen, know where they're going. She shaped another word, smaller but precise. Hi. They stayed there, the 3 of them, with Manny pretending to adjust an antenna that didn't need adjusting. Someone from marketing rolled a cart across the patio and stopped mid-roll. The fountain performed unbothered. A delivery guy used the courtyard as a shortcut and chose to go the long way around, as if the ground between those people had been roped off for sacred reasons. In the conference room later, the napkin bridge sat under glass like a museum thing. Cal lifted the cup and the straw and then moved them aside. He put his keys down instead. They splayed the way they always did, brass and nicked, the shapes of access. "I want to ask you something," Mr. Vale said. He had his jacket off again, sleeves rolled to elbows, throat bare in a way that made him look human instead of headline. "You told me not to make her a door, I hear you, but I said what I said. You helped her do this. I don't know how to thank you in a way that feels like English." He spread his hands, empty and not ashamed of it. "Name it. If you still won't, then tell me what to build." Cal looked at Leela instead of at the man. She had the napkin under her palm, the drawn bridge catching the oil of her skin. He thought about all the gifts people didn't know they had permission to give. He pushed his keys across the table so the light washed over them. "Make more of these," he said. Vale frowned like he'd misheard. "Keys." "Places," Cal said. "Access. Leave the roof unlocked for the sky but make it safe so security doesn't get ulcers. Put a chair by that fountain and don't call it a wellness initiative. Change the elevator chime on this floor to something softer and let people request that anywhere they need it. Put a room on every other floor where the vents hum nice and nobody asks why you're there. Pay Manny real. Give the basement new bulbs. Hire more people who make quiet things happen and let them be loud when it's time." He waited to see if too many words would make the man defensive. They didn't. Vale looked like a map had been unrolled and a road he'd never noticed had painted itself in. "Yes," he said, without looking at anyone to see if it was okay. "Yes." He turned, called down the hall, and people appeared because that's what happens when certain men lift their hands. He told them the list. He didn't call it a list. He said it like a thing that was already true and they were late to the noticing. A woman from security showed up at the door like she'd been expecting to be a villain and wasn't sure how to proceed without a cape. Her name tag said Janelle. She had the softest voice of anyone in a uniform Cal had ever met. "I'm sorry about the message," she said, looking right at Cal. "It was from Ops. They're nervous about the roof. It wasn't personal." "Nothing about us is separate from us," Cal said, not unkind. She nodded like that was exactly the problem, and then offered a solution anyway. "We can badge the roof to the three of you and Manny. I'll put signage that makes lawyers sleep and cushions that make me sleep. If anyone has questions, they come to me." Vale heard a person do her job and made space for her to do it. "Do that," he said, "and whatever he said," he pointed at Cal, "do that everywhere." Janelle handed Cal a slim gray card with his name on it in block letters. It looked like nothing. It felt like a door. They went back to the courtyard for lunch because good things deserve repetition. Manny brought 2 oranges and made the peel come off like a spiral ribbon. He handed the longer part to Leela like a sash and put the smaller crown on his own head. She smiled in that sideways way and then came out with it straight, no hiding. "Thank you," she told him. Manny pretended to bow and then didn't pretend. "Any time," he said to the ground, because the ground had held all of them well today. Afternoon slid toward 3. Cal needed to be 5 places at once, but he stayed until the smallest reasons to leave had lost their voices. He gathered the cups and the straw that had done so much work and tucked the napkin bridge back into his pocket without the glass. It felt fragile. It felt used. It felt alive. "Tomorrow," he said, code and promise, to no one and to both of them. Leela touched the napkin through the fabric of his pocket like she could feel the line of the bridge under the cotton. She looked at the glass, at the city, at her father. Then she pinned Cal with a gaze so steady he forgot his feet had jobs. "Again," she said. He grinned, helpless. "Again." He walked the halls with his mop and his joy. He changed the elevator chime on 32 to something softer, a bell that sounded like a spoon tapped against a mug. He showed Janelle how to find the setting and watched her take notes like she'd been waiting her whole life to be asked to be kind at work. He texted Manny a picture of the fountain at golden hour and got back a blurry shot of a donut with the caption, "For the water gods." He was in the stairwell when his phone buzzed. Unknown number again. "Ignore earlier. Keep doing what you're doing. I was wrong." He stared at it. Another message came right away. "It was me, Marla the Hawk, I'm learning." He smiled toward the concrete, then toward the person he would never meet in the hallway and always meet in the small changes that make big ones possible. He slid the phone into his back pocket and kept moving. Evening put a low hand on the building and told it to calm down. The conference room was just glass and table again, the kind of room that, if you stripped the words from it, was still full of what had been said there. Cal went in to wipe a ring of water where a cup had stood. He caught his reflection and didn't recognize the man for a second. He looked like someone who decided to be permanent. The door opened without a knock. Vale stepped in alone. He carried nothing this time. It made him look heavier and lighter at once. "I need to say it better," he said. "Thank you." Cal shrugged like a man who knew shrugging kept the sky from falling. "It wasn't me. It was gravity. It was soup. It was a balloon. It was her." Vale laughed clean this time. "Fine," he said, accepting the demotion. "Then thank you for noticing gravity." He took something from his pocket, a small, unremarkable key on a plain ring. He set it on the table. "There's a room on 14. We're clearing it out. Plants, soft chairs, no agenda. The sign will say, 'Quiet, not silence.' It opens with this. Might as well start where you are." Cal looked at it. The metal warmed to his fingers like it had been waiting its whole life for a palm. He put it with his others. It clicked into place like a note in a song that had needed it. He locked up. The night crew traded jokes. The building lowered its voice. Cal headed for the roof one last time because when you tell a roof you'll see it tomorrow, you should say goodnight today. Janelle's badge reader blinked green on the first try. A cushion sat where the sharp lip of concrete had been. The balloon he'd left had gone to the sky, as balloons do. He stood at the edge anyway, 5 feet back, safe, present. The city worked out loud under him and then didn't. Behind him, light footsteps. He turned. Leela stood in the doorway with her father at a respectful distance. She held the napkin bridge in both hands like a thing you pass and keep. The wind lifted one corner. She pinned it with her thumb. She closed her eyes. The night brushed her face. She wore the scarf again because it made a kind of courage you could see. She opened her mouth. The sound that came wasn't big, it didn't need to be. It was the size of the space between two people when they decide to cross it. "Home," she said. The word went out onto the wind and came back, not louder, but truer. Vale let out the breath he'd been holding since winter. Cal put his hand on the rail and felt the metal know it was being useful. Somewhere below, the new elevator chime practiced its softer voice. Somewhere above, a plane banked, and the moon handled the rest. Leela put the napkin in Cal's hand and pressed his keys with her other hand so they clicked, metal to metal, an agreement signed in the oldest language there is. "Tomorrow," she whispered. He nodded, and the building, grateful, seemed to